The boroughs are New York City. The burbs are everywhere else. Real estate is the ultimate game of risk and reward. It's the biggest investment most people ever make. Fortunes are made over a lifetime and lost in a day. And we're not playing with monopoly money. How do you stay ahead? Who's buying? Who's selling? And why? What do they know? We want the truth. You need an edge. Boroughs and Burbs is your secret weapon, giving you the insider knowledge and strategies you need to succeed in the high-stakes world of real estate. From Palm Beach to Palm Springs, Manhattan to Malibu, we press the experts to expose the pain, find the deals, and occasionally predict the future. That's Boroughs and Burbs, Thursdays, 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific. Because everyone can make money in real estate.
Welcome, everybody. Boroughs and Burbs, episode 143, season 4, episode 143, The Bronx Show. I never thought I'd be doing The Bronx Show, and I've really done some soul searching. Why not? Why is it difficult to find a Bronx market report? Why don't we talk more about the Bronx? So one of the things I'm really excited about today is we've got Orion Jones from The Real Deal, and I'm going to ask him that question. Why not more Bronx coverage? I'm excited about the Bronx. I want to hear more. I'm hungry about the Bronx because I can't afford everything in Manhattan, but it occurs to me that there might be some value plays in the Bronx. So I'm going to ask Orion that question. I've got Sharene Long and Dejanay Brown, and she says, I'm a Bronx girl through and through. So that is a really good reason to ask Dejanay to take us through the Bronx. But before I do that, let me walk us through a couple of screens. Share screen. First of all, that's Boroughs and Burbs on Apple Podcasts. You can get all 143 episodes there. Please, if you like this, share it, like it, write us a review. We need the promotion. Here is Sharene Long. You'll find her at elman.com. Here is Dejanay Brown. Fabulous picture, Dejanay. Love that picture. You gotta tell me who your photographer is. I want to look that good on my profile picture. There's Orion Jones. I couldn't find a profile picture on The Real Deal, so here he is on LinkedIn. And I learned that he went to school at Columbia University, and he's been at The Real Deal for 4 years. I want to thank our sponsor, Grace Farms, which is an 80 acres of green and grass and beauty. And it made me think, what's the equivalent in the Bronx? So I'm going to ask you about the New York Botanical Gardens, the jewel of the Bronx. It's got to come up during our show. And I'm going to ask you about Hunts Point. So without any further ado, let me say hello to my co-host, Roberto Cabrera. Where are you, Roberto?
I am in Manhattan, and I am dying to learn about the land of mystery, which I know nothing about, that is right there.
All right. There we go. All right, recording. How do you want to begin? How about you, Dejanay? You said you grew up in the Bronx, and you've been a realtor in the Bronx for the last 2 years.
Yes.
Why the Bronx?
For a long time, I said we as Bronx residents had to buy back and take back our neighborhoods, because as the gentrification is moving up from Brooklyn and Queens, it's creeping into the Bronx, but I didn't really know how to do that. So once I became a realtor, I feel like the important message I had was buying is affordable. And sometimes it's about the information you have. And so I feel like the Bronx is the poorest borough, unfortunately. So I think it's important for me to share that message with other Bronx residents that you can buy. You can start with a co-op, work your way up. New York is mostly co-ops, especially the Bronx. So you can start with a co-op, work your way up to your forever home. But I am a Bronx girl. I have to say, I always tell people I'm the worst New Yorker because I Google map everywhere I go. But being a realtor has definitely helped me in that aspect. So I'm going to help you guys as much as I can today.
And when you say you're a Bronx girl, when I think of the Bronx, I think of a great deal of variety in the Bronx. I think of a collection of neighborhoods. And if you talk about the South Bronx, which had a bad rap when I was growing up, versus the country club section of the Bronx, what could be more different? When you talk about being a Bronx girl, do you talk about being of a particular neighborhood, or is it enough to say I'm a Bronx girl? What neighborhood are you in?
I feel like I'm from the West Bronx. So like the Kingsbridge area near Grand Concourse, most recently by the Bronx Zoo. So when I say Bronx girl, I've lived in the Bronx all my life. I went to schools in the Bronx all my life. So that's what I mean when I say I'm a Bronx girl. Being from the Bronx, you kind of stay in certain areas. You venture out a little bit, but everyone pretty much stays in their area. So, like I mentioned, once I became a realtor, I was exposed to more areas in the Bronx. And so I feel like the difference between the South Bronx versus Country Club or Throgs Neck is definitely income levels, which leads to different opportunities in those neighborhoods. South Bronx is getting some, new development going on. So they're working on it. It's getting better. The neighborhoods are starting to clean up the neighborhoods, bring in nice housing. So it's getting there.
Yes, Hut's Point, it definitely doesn't feel the way that it felt 15, 20 years ago. A lot more updating has been done, housing, a lot of new apartment buildings, a lot of the shopping centers too have been revitalized. So definitely good things going on down there.
Sharene, are you a Bronx girl?
Just a tad bit. I have a confession to make. The first year of my life, I was born in the Bronx. I lived there in the Bronx. We grew up on 181st and Reiner, which is kind of near Arthur Avenue in the Bronx. And then when I turned 1, my parents decided to move to Westchester, which is where I reside now in New Rochelle. But so I am a Bronx girl at heart because that's
you do brokerage in the Bronx.
Yes, I do brokerage in the Bronx. I work out of the Riverdale office, like Dejanay. I also sell most of my real estate in the Bronx of helping people sell and buy properties. And I do an abundance of rentals in the Bronx as well.
So can you tell me, over the last, say, 10 years, what's been the big headline of what's changed and what's happening? When I think of the Bronx, I think of all the developers who are there's no space in Manhattan. They're starting to go to some of the other boroughs, and they're really starting to think about going into the Bronx and really putting a footprint there. Is that really evidence? Do you see that? Do you see construction going on all over the place? Talk to me about that a bit.
So there is an abundance of construction going on all over the Bronx. A lot of contractors and developers, they are breaking ground on these new buildings in the Bronx. It's a little bit more tedious of getting approval with the building department, but it is getting done. That's what's most important. And it's actually opening up the housing market to an abundance of people. There's a lot of homeowners who are downsizing. They need to move into buildings because they have elevators. They can't deal with steps anymore. These new buildings are giving them opportunity to rent for a year or two while they figure out where they're going to relocate to out of state. These new developments for the buildings are also helping people who have housing vouchers. Most of these buildings are allowing people who are homeless to now put a roof over their head. So it is a great thing to be seen happening in the Bronx. And it's also long overdue because everyone needs a place to live. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you are, we all need a place. So this new development is doing us justice. Absolutely.
To piggyback off
Orion.
There is a lot of construction. Sorry, I know you want to get to Orion. There's a lot of construction going on. And what I noticed is developers coming to the Bronx and knocking on the doors of the small single family homes, the multi-family homes. Even in my neighborhood, is about 4 single family homes that are now small boutique buildings of maybe like 3 floors, maybe like 6 to 10 units, real small, but I've noticed recently.
It all depends on the zoning too with that. Like in the Bronx, right? If a developer hears that a particular block has R7 to R9 zoning, they're all over that block like white and rice. They don't care what the houses look like, if they're attached, detached. They're going for everyone on the block, like Dejanay just said, because they see it as a building opportunity for them. And that is a really big advantage for the Bronx and anywhere in the 5 boroughs, because developers don't have that opportunity in other places like Westchester County. So they'll knock on homeowners' doors, like Dejanay said. They'll, oh, I'll give you $1 million for your house. And, you know, most of these homeowners are like, oh, $1 million? You know, sure. I never see that much money in a couple of lifetimes. I'll take it, you know? So it's an advantage for the developers, but for realtors or for some homeowners, I feel like they're so quick to say yes that they're missing out on the top dollar they can get for their house.
You guys need to knock on those doors first and say, listen, if anybody comes calling, you let me know and I'll get you a better deal.
Yes, I've actually saved a couple of sellers like that too from actually giving away their houses to developers. I'm like, don't sign any paperwork. I'm going to do a CMA for you and we'll sign the paperwork. And then I went to their house with everything. They signed and they're like, oh my God, I was going to give away $600,000. Yes, you were. But you met me and I saved the day.
Wow.
So Orion, at the Real Deal, what is, how do they think about the Bronx? I mean, every day when I read in the Real Deal, I hear about some new exciting development in Brooklyn. It seems to be on fire. Queens, Southern, on fire. But I rarely hear about the Bronx, and I'm a little surprised because there's some exciting pockets of the Bronx. I would expect more development around Yankee Stadium, the new Yankee Stadium. I expected more development around the jewel of New York, the Botanical Gardens. I expected more development around Fordham. So where are the headlines? Where's the excitement over at the Real Deal when we think about the Bronx?
Well, like anywhere in New York City, a lot of new development follows government policy. So there is a lot of active new development, like your other guests are saying, particularly along Jerome Avenue, which, if you know the Bronx a little bit, runs north-south, kind of on the west side. A lot of active development there. There were rezonings that happened in Mott Haven in the South Bronx, changes to the zoning beginning in the Giuliani administration. So the city has sort of been allowing for new development, again, as you said, in certain pockets of the Bronx for a long time, but it's really taken, I think, a longer time than other areas that have been rezoned, such as Long Island City in Queens, Gowanus, and Brooklyn. The private investment has been slower to find its way into the Bronx, but don't get me wrong, it has. There was a huge investment by Brookfield Properties in the early 2020s. So even though the Mott Haven area had been rezoned in favor of residential development for a while, developers that I've spoken with said it was, for them, a much more recent infrastructure plan to make the neighborhood accessible to people who live there. So that wasn't a zoning change. That was just a public infrastructure investment. So that has really spurred a lot of development in Mott Haven. Brookfield Properties is the biggest developer there. There are other smaller properties, smaller developers. And that's kind of true along Jerome Avenue, I think. No sort of mega projects are coming to mind. One other reason you may see less coverage of new developments that happen in the Bronx is, the publication tends to cover the, quote unquote, free market. So if a large 100% affordable building goes up in the Bronx, of course, that's fantastic. But it's not something, it's something that will be relevant to a smaller slice of our readers, those who would be pursuing the kinds of lending that are necessary to build affordable housing projects, low-income housing tax credits, things like that. So, we do cover those when they come about, particularly when city policy and city zoning kind of primes the pump for development. But I think I would emphasize that for really large new developments like Brookfields, which has thousands of new apartments, a quarter of which are affordable under a development program in the city, which caps the income levels. It was criticized for allowing too high of rents. It's since been changed to lower rents, so we'll see what happens there. But in the Bronx, like elsewhere, I would say development happens at the pace that private investment is available.
Would you say the velocity of the velocity of increase is slow? Like people just putting their toe in the water just to feel it out, because it's for me, it's very unknown. And I think there's a lot, in Manhattan, every corner of Manhattan is really known by a large swath of people. The Bronx is a big mystery in many ways. Is that why I would say it's slow, but would you say it's slow, or would you say there's actually a lot of velocity of construction there?
Well, just compared to Queens and Brooklyn, forget about Manhattan for a minute, but compared to those two other boroughs, it's much slower. And that's a result of, again, in my view, market forces, the desirability among a certain population of people to relocate and live in places like Greenpoint. They are willing to pay much higher rents to live in that neighborhood than they are to live in Mott Haven. And you can get, comparatively affordable rents in places like Mott Haven. You go down there, it's been under construction for years and years. And, there's construction everywhere. It's not always easy to access. That ultimately is a big part of its desirability. It's closeness to Manhattan, just across the Harlem River. But development has moved at the pace of private investment, and different neighborhoods fetch different rent, just in different histories, different places. Dejanay said the gentrification word earlier.
I was cursing. I did. I cursed.
No, but
what does that mean? Talk to me about what does that mean in the Bronx, gentrification? People, go ahead. I won't put words in your mouth.
When I say gentrification, I think a lot of us see gentrification as outsiders moving in and being able to afford what current residents cannot, and then new development accommodating these new transplants versus accommodating the residents that were already there. So they're putting better supermarkets in the areas or better living conditions in the areas for other people versus doing it for the residents that were already there. So like a lot of the construction is going on by the highways so that people can commute to Manhattan for work. Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, maybe not so much Queens, but Manhattan and Brooklyn residents want to move further north because it is still affordable at this point. So that's what I mean when I say gentrification. It's making it more accommodating for outside residents. And
so I'm going to push back. Don't you need gentrification in order to attract new development? You have to attract new money in order to make better supermarkets, in order to attract new stores. You're trying on the one hand to attract new blood, new money. On the other hand, the Bronx sounds like a bit of a closed club. And it's like, yeah, we don't want you coming in. We're happy just the way it is. And so I sense a bit of tension in the Bronx.
Sharene said she had a confession earlier, and I'm going to confess something today. I really wanted to do this, but a part of me is like, I don't want to mention certain neighborhoods because I don't want so many people to know. But it's not that we're trying to shun gentrification. It's make it a better quality of living for us already. You know what I'm saying? Yes, we would love a Trader Joe's in the Bronx. That would be amazing. We would love more ShopRites or whatever it is, better quality supermarkets and stores, safer neighborhoods. So do that for the residents that's already there, because once the other people come in, now they're being priced out because landlords are chasing the voucher rates. You know, so your Section 8 city FEPs, they're saying we'll give you X amount of dollars for a 1 bedroom. And now a landlord of a small private home is saying, well, if they're going to get that amount, I'm going to charge that rate too. And now the average Bronx resident cannot afford that. So now where do they go? You know, so that's my beef.
Where do they go? Just curious. Where do they go?
A lot of Bronx residents,
a lot of people are going down south or
down south, the tri-state, New Jersey, Connecticut. There's been a lot of people moving to Connecticut.
Connecticut. We welcome gentrification. It's just that, you know, if it was in moderation, it would be better. You know, it's nothing wrong with doing increases in rent, but the people who grew up in these neighborhoods, they love their neighborhoods, and it breaks their heart when they feel like they're being forced to move away. But at the same time, gentrification brings diversity. It brings more culture. It allows everyone to live together and long to get along with each other in a cohesive way. So we can try to find a happy medium, you know, with developers, then everything will be just peachy keen. So that's what the issue is. And in terms of the development taking a long time, is really all on the building department. Not to point the finger, but I curate violations for sellers. You know, I serve as an expediter. Before I go and take a listing, I actually do thorough research on the property to see if they have HPD and ECP violations. These things that developers are going through for approval to the DOB is real. And the DOB is understaffed because those job descriptions are so tedious that if you do one thing wrong, it's like, oh, you're fired, on to the next. And then they take months to fill these job positions. And when I go down to the DOB, whether it's in Brooklyn, Manhattan, or the Bronx, or any of the other boroughs, I often come across developers who are super frustrated, like, this is my fourth time down here this week. I just need a sign off. And they're like, throwing papers at the window reception. You know, you get more honey than you do with vinegar, you know? So that's what the holdup is. And if these people if they're at DOB's mercy, it works better to treat them nicer and to just do what they're telling you to do so you can get your building finished and up and running, because you're losing more money with it being empty and bleeding out the pockets and running out of construction money to build, then you complying with them so you can get 100% occupancy. And that's in addition to having skyrocket prices.
Is it harder to build in the Bronx than other places? I don't know whether that's who can answer that, but I know that the friction, when I ask developers here in Connecticut, would you do that project again? They say, oh, no way too much risk, took way too long, way too much red tape. You know, I need to find something that's shovel ready. I can't take risk. So I got to imagine that the same thing's going on in the Bronx, where they say, I can't really deploy my capital and take 3 years arguing with town hall. Is there more friction in the Bronx in order to get more bureaucracy, or about the same everywhere in the city?
Definitely. I have a lot of investors. Every time I list a property, it's so funny. An investor sends me a text message. Oh, I'm looking for 1 to 4 families in the Bronx. This, that, and the third has to be R7 to R9 zoning. If it's R3 to R5A zoning, it's not going to work for me. I'm like, oh, I'll keep you in mind, and I'll put you on the list of my other people. But it's like their criteria is so tight that makes it difficult too for them to find that perfect block to build on. You know, also they can't be a certain amount of feet of another developer, all this other logistic thing. So that leads them to be even more pickier. So, you know, in terms of my most favorite buyers to work with, they're in the bottom of my list, unfortunately. But you know, to each his own. Everyone has their preference, but I think that makes it harder for approval for them, finding sites. You know, I think that research should be done to see what other developments were approved in that area from their start to completion date before an investor decides if they want to invest in there to make it worth their time. Because if the zoning could be right, but if you see all these other buildings that have 40% completion, something's wrong. It's not all the developers. So more due diligence needs to be done, in my opinion.
So Roberto and I used to like to ask this question, like, if we have $1 million and we come to you and we say, help me find a good investment, you know, let's say I just landed a killer job over at Fordham University. And so I've got to work in the Bronx. Have you got any interesting places that I could raise a family and have a short commute to work in the Bronx? Can you, and let's say I'm looking at the $1 million level. Have you got anything for me?
I would say definitely on the east side of the Bronx, like along Pelham Parkway.
Okay.
There's some hidden gems over there.
And what could we get for that $1 million?
A 3 or 4 family, definitely. A 3
even
or 4
families are $1 million in that area right now. If you go
3
to
or
East
4
Bronx,
family, not 3 or 4 bedroom.
Yeah, 3 or 4 family. I think that's more ideal with you in this scenario with both of you coming to us saying, hey, I got $1 million I want to invest in. I think a 3 or 4 family in Morris Park or in Pelham Parkway, like Dejanay just said. Morris Park is like Herring Avenue, Morris Park Avenue.
My team closed a deal on Hone Avenue, and it was right under $1 million, and that was a single family.
So that's near Jacoby Hospital too.
You have Einstein Hospital over there. So definitely that East Bronx area, and it's close to the trains. You have buses over there. That's one of the areas where there will be the new Metro North station. So the East Bronx is kind of like a hidden gem.
Talk to me about that Metro North plan. What does that mean, Metro North?
Yes, I'm so excited for the borough. It's going to be going from like Co-op City, Morris Park, Van Ness, Rochester, Hunts Point, and it's going to go straight to Penn Station. And those areas like Bronx Neck, Country Club, they're a little more secluded from public transportation. So over that area, exactly, John, is a little secluded. So this will help bridge the gap. So that's exciting. And then we also have the ferry down where the mouse was. We have a ferry.
Classen Point. And there's an abundance of condominiums over there too. That are gated communities. That's another hidden gem of the Bronx. When you go down here, I consider that part also the South Bronx, where Harding Park, Classen Point is. Because when you go down here, it doesn't feel like the Bronx. It reminds me a lot of City Island because you're so close to the water. And their condos that they have down there actually are in the structure of townhouses. So it gives single family house living, but they're condos. And
they're gated communities over there. So that's another little surprise.
Is Country Club nice? Sounds nice.
Country Club is very cute. It's right, condos and single family homes on the water.
They have co-ops over in Country Club.
So a single family home there costs what?
It could be up to $1 million, a little over $1 million.
So on the lower end, it's $650,000. That's the lowest I've seen sold recently, and that's on the absolute lowest end. But between $650,000 to $1 million, 1.1, depending how close you are to the water with your water views. If it's something with uninstructed water views, you're getting 1.1 all day.
Can you talk to me about transportation? Because, for example, if I think of Brooklyn, it's not hard to get into Brooklyn. But if you're in Brooklyn and you want to get around Brooklyn, it's pretty complicated because there's, everything stretching all in one direction. There's no, for example, for lack of a better term, crosstown bus, crosstown transportation. Is the Bronx similar in that sense where it is a little difficult to get around?
It depends on your preference for travel. If you like taking the subway, The subway doesn't go over near Country Club or Throgs Neck, but they have the express bus that can get you to that subway within 7 minutes, and that's like a 5-minute walk. Also what I like in those neighborhoods, some of the streets don't have alternate street parking. So if you don't live close to the express bus, you drive your car to one of those nice residential blocks, you park your car, and then you get on the 5 train from Morris Park to go down to the Brooklyn. That actually takes you all the way to Brooklyn, the last stop for that train. And that's why a lot of people really love like Morris Park and the Pelham Parkway neighborhood too, because those trains can actually bring you straight into Brooklyn. It'll take maybe like an hour or 20 minutes or so, but it's good for convenience. And so wherever you aren't near a subway line, there are always express buses. There's people like me, regular buses. There's people who like me who love taking their car, driving their car everywhere. I'm in my car 10 hours a day sometimes. So you can hop on the highway and get to Brooklyn within 38 minutes from pretty much anywhere in the Bronx if there's no traffic. I know that because I'm in Brooklyn 4 times a week and I live in New Rochelle and I'm in the Bronx. So I'm a living testament to that. So I don't think transportation is a factor. I just really feel it's all on the buyer's needs and preference. And if you're a good agent listening, then you can find that out very easily and accommodate your client, especially if they need to relocate for job purposes to be closer to family up here. Because people from Brooklyn don't like moving to the Bronx. Anyone from Brooklyn will tell you, I love Brooklyn. Why am I going to Bronx for anything? But sometimes people have to move to Brooklyn for different reasons. I had a seller who had to downsize. I sold her 3-family and I brought her up to the Bronx, and another one I brought up to Bronxville, but it's about the needs.
I think, sorry, really quick. It wasn't until I started talking with someone from Harlem that made me realize we have a lot of buses in the Bronx. Because I would say, yeah, take the bus here or just take the bus there. He's like, I don't want to take the bus. I prefer the trains. But we do have a lot of buses. So I feel like the point about Brooklyn being hard to maneuver, I don't think we have that problem in the Bronx. There's any bus anywhere you need. But like we mentioned that High Bridge area in the Bronx, which is near like 161st Street, Yankee Stadium. That's a little secluded as well. It's a little tucked away. The Country Club, Throgs Neck is tucked away. So there is a little fewer buses and transportation over there. But as a whole, I think the Bronx has great transportation. It just takes us a little while to get from uptown.
Downtown.
You guys.
Let's talk about schools. I have to say that that's the first, second, and third most important thing when people are coming out to Connecticut, and I say why. They're like, I've decided to make a change because I'm looking for good schools. I know that in Manhattan there's a huge amount of competition to get your kid into the right schools. I mean, schools is driving the real estate market in all 5 boroughs, Connecticut, all over the country. Everybody who's moving down to Florida is saying, I'd move down to Florida because it's a low tax state, but there's not enough schools. So talk to me about the schools, and because we talked about gentrification, we talked about old people cashing out, selling their place to developers. Developers are building these, I'm guessing, for young families. How are the families reacting to the school situation?
We're not supposed to talk about schools, John.
Well, from a mother's perspective,
do you have enough of them? Do you like them? I mean,
from a mother's perspective, because I'm a mom, so I feel like from a parent perspective, I can speak on that. I feel like the beauty of the Bronx and the schools is because it's in the 5 boroughs. If you live in the Bronx, you can apply to any school that you want your child to go to. It's just a matter of if you're comfortable with your child taking the subway or the bus to those schools. With me selling an abundance of properties in the Bronx over the past 6 years, a lot of homeowners in the Bronx will want either, they'll send their child to a private school or they'll apply to a school that's in Manhattan, one of those schools that you said people can't get into, and their kids will go to school in Manhattan. So I think that is the beauty of anyone wanting to live in the 5 boroughs. If you have a child, as long as you know where the good schools are or what you consider good schools, or the ratings, then you can apply to as many schools as you see fit, and your kid will get into them. So that's the beauty. If you have to move to the Bronx, the school is not a factor. You know, there's also schools like every 2 or 3 blocks. I feel like there's like either an elementary school, middle school, or high school every 2 blocks or 3 blocks everywhere in the Bronx.
So there aren't certain sections, like, for example, on the Upper West Side, like PS 87 over here, so people are like trying to get into that location. Same with the Upper East Side, PS 6. There's not necessarily, the demand isn't necessarily driven geographically like that in the Bronx, because you can apply to anything.
We have schools like Bronx Science. That's you know,
which is where exactly?
Oh, where's Bronx Science? I think that's close to by the Bronx Zoo area. But we do have Bronx Science. We do have like KIPP Academy is a great school close to the South Bronx.
All the charter schools.
Community college, right? So we have KIPP Academy, Bronx Science, lots of charter schools and Catholic schools. We also have universities, Fordham University, Manhattan College, Monroe College, host those Bronx community. The Bronx is known for the parks and the colleges and the schools. So we do have some schools that are competitive to get into.
Yeah.
I didn't know at the time I got accepted to a KIPP Academy school, and I went to a school closer to my home at the time. And I remember, I think a teacher telling me, whenever you get into a KIPP Academy school, you never pass that up. But I wasn't aware that that was a thing. So we definitely have some competitive schools to get into in the Bronx.
I'll add that charter school developers are they play a role in the land sales market. I mean, they are players. They buy land privately, and when you have larger former industrial tracts in the places like the Bronx, you know, that's a convenient place to put a school building or to convert an old factory building. So those are the kinds of plays that companies that develop and build charter schools will go for. And they are, I don't have any, hard figures about how active they are, but in what we know as the middle of the investment sales market, roughly 10 million to 40 million, they are not infrequent buyers of land in the outer boroughs to build schools. So there's a private market for schools, that does business in real estate, just like the private market for houses. And certainly, developments like those along Jerome Avenue and in Mott Haven, those will, certainly, to the extent that there are families living in those communities, those will draw development by charter schools.
So you talked about Brookfield. Like, how long has it been since they first entered the Bronx? Has it been decades, or is it much more recent?
I don't think it's been decades. They've begun leasing. Let's see, do I have it here? Their big project in Mott Haven is called Bankside, and it has about 1,500 new apartments. COVID slowed everything down everywhere. So they began leasing that building, one of the Bankside buildings, in 2023. So, and like everything, it's a 400 unit building, but there are 3 apartments that are available to lease. Okay, so
that's it.
Separate conversation, maybe. But
that was beautiful.
But down there, a lot of them are still coming online. These buildings, exteriors have been finished for a while, but COVID probably slowed down the building out of the interior of a lot of these buildings.
Is this the location that's right over the bridge from 145th Street, more or less? Right by Gotham Tennis?
Yeah, that's kind of that's the northern edge of all of the Mott Haven developments. Yeah, and you can go down, probably quarter to half a mile further to get to the very southern point. But yeah, these are all those developments. And again, those were all kind of facilitated slowly by zoning changes. And, there came a point of, there came a point at which private investors, including Brookfield, were willing to go in and make the investment. And, from what I'm told, even though it would have been possible to build developments like this according to the zoning code, it was a large public infrastructure investment, which gave lenders confidence to invest in this area.
Who's moving into a place like the Lincoln? Are people moving in from out of the neighborhood, or are people moving across town, or is this young families?
A little bit of both. I know people that moved into these beautiful, and the buildings are beautiful. These new development buildings, they have lots of amenities. They're gorgeous. I know people that moved in that are cash paying, and that won the lotteries. You guys are familiar with the housing lotteries?
No.
You apply for new development buildings, and then once it's ready, they'll call you, and then you'll just move into the buildings. So
when the building's at 80% completion, they start going through the waiting list for the people who apply for the lottery. A lot of these developers are either they're paying money into New York City, and in turn they're giving a certain amount of average median income units. So some of them are doing 80-20, where 20% is dedicated to housing vouchers. Some developers are doing 50-50. The 50-50 buildings are more scarce, but what each town in the 5 borough, and even in Westchester too, throughout New York State, whatever developer is coming in building, they have to allocate a certain amount of units to affordable housing, so that way it can help with the disparity of people that have housing vouchers or people that don't make over $88,000 a year, an opportunity to live in one of these nice brand new buildings. So it is good that they do that, and that's the purpose of the lottery, to give people an opportunity, the people who are getting pushed out of their neighborhoods, like we were talking about earlier, an opportunity to stay.
Is the lottery, is it literally like a lottery in the sense that, if you get it, you're like, oh my gosh, I got one? Or is it, there is some measurable probability that you would get it?
So there is, so the way it's structured is it's working class people and also people with housing vouchers. It's not only people with housing vouchers, but New York City will open a portal, NYC Connect, for people to go and apply for a lottery in a particular building. So they'll put in their household size, income, and then they'll compile an Excel sheet list, and they'll start to prioritize the list based off who lives closest to that new building. The people who live within a 10-mile radius or 5-mile radius of that building will get first preference to get called, because those are the people who have lived in this neighborhood. And then they'll prioritize second priority. Do you work in that neighborhood? And also, are you a resident? And then the third option will be like, do you not live in this neighborhood, but do you want to get put on the lottery list? And then, so it gives everyone an opportunity to apply, but it gets prioritized by the people who have been living there and grew up first, that meet either the income requirements. If they don't have a housing voucher, they have a housing voucher, then, you have to accept them regardless if they have income or not, because the voucher is guaranteed money.
I will add that there are hundreds of applications for every unit that is classified as affordable. So there is a very real housing shortage. Mm-hmm. Probably goes without saying, but people who study the matter estimate that the city is short about 500,000 apartments.
Yes.
That's a that's a really big number. And the way that New York City has chosen to create additional affordable housing is not necessarily how you may choose to do it if you were just kind of at a whiteboard and you were going to, sort of like start fresh and say, how do we build more affordable housing? I won't get too far in the weeds here, but
they're using the old buildings, the buildings that are closed.
Let's get in the weeds. I want to hear this.
Yeah, let's get in the weeds.
Yeah, well, if you're a developer, you definitely know of this thing called 421A. It's a tax break, a tax abatement. Typically, it's a full 30-year tax abatement. It is the city's largest tax expenditure, so that I offer as evidence that the city is committed to, in this quirky policy way that it's developed, of building affordable housing. The original 421A was simply a way to incentivize real estate development in New York, period. It came about in the 70s and 80s when New York City was headed in a bad direction financially. It ultimately became, through negotiations at the state legislature, they conditioned the creation of affordable housing, meaning new apartments where a limit was set, an income limit was set on who could rent there based on the number of people in your household. And that's a unique way to do it. So in other words, with the exception of publicly funded real estate projects or publicly owned real estate development, the largest of which, owned by the city, is NYCHA. Okay, this is, for those of you who aren't aware, is not the paragon of, New York City is an infamously bad landlord. There's been some privatization lately in regard to NYCHA that's been helpful, but we've put the development of affordable housing on the backs of private developers mostly, and that's not the way that other cities throughout the world, other major European cities mainly, have chosen to do it. So it's a quirk of the New York system, and the politics have made it such that generally, no matter who you are, you kind of roll your eyes and grind your teeth a little bit about the pace of new housing production in the city. There's not really anybody who judges it to be sufficient, given the shortage and given rent prices, which certainly play a role in the displacement of local community members. About gentrification, I'll just say that that's something that occurs whether there is new real estate development or not, as long as the city is growing, as long as there are an inflow of people looking to get their start. And to do that in a place like New York, you need reasonable rents. So gentrification will happen as long as New York City is growing. And I think certainly from the industry, certainly from the perspective of many in real estate, it's just a question of whether the city wants to build housing in a way that every single study, every single academic study, it's important to make this point clear, says that new development brings down the cost of housing across the board. So it's I think to a lot of people in real estate, ultimately a question of whether we're building or not. And in New York, it's always a bit one step forward, half step back.
Can you speak to any cities that are actually doing this right and what they're doing?
Baltimore.
I was just thinking that.
I'm interested in what the experience is going to be like. So first of all, Dejanay and Sharene, you're both in the Riverdale office?
Yes.
Is that where all the realtors are hanging out in Riverdale? Is that the only place, or can I find realtors like on every block?
Only Elliman office in the Bronx is in Riverdale.
How about Brown Harris Stevens or Corcoran or the others? Are they spread out throughout the Bronx, or are they everywhere?
Well, no, there are only certain areas in the Bronx. Brown Harris Stevens actually right across the street from us, right?
Yeah.
Corcoran Group, they actually more so don't have a Bronx location. So I feel like with us being in Riverdale, we have an advantage.
Okay.
And I know we have an advantage because there's not many prominent, well-known brokerages in the Bronx. So we do have an upper hand with that. And there's another
Compass?
company.
Sotheby's?
Smaller
There's
brokerages.
a smaller one.
Like,
It's some. It was just told to me yesterday. It's actually one that's been around for decades. I just found out about 2 days ago. But they've been based in Riverdale. But in terms of being one of the big dogs, Douglas Elliman, we're where it's
Is
at.
it fairly even with some of the smaller firms, the little satellite firms and the mom and pop firms that are probably around all over the place that have been in those neighborhoods forever? Are they collaborative, like to co-broke with and things like that?
Open houses?
Yeah, we definitely are collaborative with the neighborhood brokerages in Riverdale. Just in the office as a whole, we are always open to co-broke because it's never about the realtor, it's about our clients.
No, I know that you would be, but are they? Some of them be like, look, I've owned this neighborhood for a while. I'm not showing you this listing.
Oh. Well, that hasn't happened with me.
Okay.
But but I don't think it's happened with other people either. It's not dog eat dog. Other parts of the Bronx, it does get like that. When it's like that, I just put my hands up and I walk away because there's too much business. Houses are literally on top of each other. You won't let me show your listing. I'm gonna go and get your neighbor's listing. How about that?
So I mentioned that I'm a new professor at Fordham, and Roberto is the new manager of the Yankees. So we show up in your office, and we say, I just got a job in the Bronx, and I need to live close to where I work. What are you going to ask me in order to try and find the right neighborhood for me? What kind of questions do you want to know? Because it seems like a great deal of variety in the Bronx. So what kind of questions are you going to ask me?
Definitely. Are you buying or renting?
I'm buying. I'm buying, and I think I want some green space.
Okay, so you definitely I would want to know, how do you want to commute to work? Do you want to be on public transportation? Do you want to drive to work? I would also want to know, do you care about what's in the neighborhood? Because you can be in neighborhoods where it's busy with restaurants and shops and stores, or do you want to be a little more secluded where it's mainly residential? What else would I want to know? What else do I ask? Do you need parking? We have a lot of homes with parking, but some of these homes, like on the West Bronx and certain parts of the Bronx, is only street parking. I know everyone has a car now since 2020, so can you do with the street parking?
Yes. Yeah.
There are a lot more cars in the Bronx than there are in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And they're taking up parking for bike lanes, which I'm not too thrilled about, because New York City, we already don't want to share the road with other drivers. So now the bicyclists are there and they're not using the bike lanes that they took the parking from us.
Other things I'll ask the buyer is, what kind of structure are you looking for, brick or frame in the Bronx?
I think I want a brownstone. You got any of those?
Of course. Where do you want? I have several in Riverdale. I have several section
Bronx.
of the Bronx down on Bruckner Boulevard. Do you want a single family
I want a single family brownstone with a little backyard.
The Bronx has anything you need. You want
let's go over to Country Club. Eli Avenue, Country Club, Pelham Parkway, perfect. That will be the area.
What's John's budget need to be? Because he might need to teach a few more classes.
So over there, it's definitely between $975 to around $1.2 million, depending on how many bedrooms and baths you want in that nice brownstone with your.
John's got a lot of kids.
Oh, okay. So definitely 1.25 to be exact.
But also, not the brownstone, but you can get a decent house in the 600,000s and up. I noticed that below 600,000 is more of the fixer uppers, which a lot of people don't want right now. Everyone just wants to move in. No one wants to do work. Very few of my clients were okay with doing work, but 600,000 and above, you can get something, you might have to do some updates, but you can move in.
Yes. Your first house will not be your last house. And that's something that I always tell all my buyers. with taking them out, because the house is not going to check everything on your wish list. It's not. So you have to compromise here or there with one or two things. But as long as you get your foot in the door, that's all that matters.
Do you have many or any doorman co-op like pre-war buildings? Like lots of them or handfuls or?
Definitely Riverdale. Definitely a lot of doorman buildings in Riverdale.
Absolutely. In the South Bronx, where they're doing a lot of the new rentals, they have like the Bruckner House, they have doormen, other buildings that are owned by RXR, they have doormen down there, you know. So definitely over in Riverdale, like Dejanay just said. Certain parts of Country Club, if there's buildings there, there's definitely doormen. Morris Park.
So can I actually get a place that with a view of the Hudson in Riverdale?
Ooh, so Spooin Duville, that's the over, yeah, that is where you get all the Hudson views. Most of the buildings over there, you get water views from all of the rooms and double balconies.
Can I afford that? Because that sounds like easy access to Manhattan with water views that I can't get in Manhattan.
You definitely
can get into a condo. Maybe not.
There's some single family homes over there, but those are going for around $1 million, like we said. I feel like that's a fair selling price. Some go for a little bit more, 1.8 million, 1.5 to 1.8. But if you have to have that water view so you can have what's called blue mine, I think it's worth spending that amount of money. Absolutely. And even over in the second part of the map, you know, those that are more set back, those are co-ops that you could purchase.
There we go. $5.8 million. I got my castle on the Hudson.
Yeah.
You better teach more classes, John.
That's literally right there. So yeah.
Everyone's like, that's in the Bronx. That's in the Bronx.
Yeah.
Wow, that's outstanding. Wow.
Beautiful.
Riverdale is another hidden gem of the Bronx. That's my most favorite hidden gem. Even though I've been selling real estate in the Bronx for 6 years, I recently just found out about Riverdale 2 years ago. And I'm like, holy moly, where have you been my whole life? It reminds me so much of New Rochelle, where I live. And because of that, it's very near and dear to my heart.
Oh,
good vibes.
What are we missing from the conversation that we should know?
I think we should not sleep on the Bronx. It's definitely quietly developing. You guys think it's so mysterious, but there's definitely a lot going on under wraps. We do have the most parks out of all the boroughs, so there is a lot of green land. You might not get water views all the time, but you'll definitely get some nice views of the trees. With the new development, they're putting in new like green spaces to hang out. But the moral of the story is the Bronx is not to be slept on, and there's a lot of opportunity in the Bronx right now.
Yes. So I think that hidden things that we didn't touch on in the Bronx is the Bronx has 2 horse equestriums, people that are into horseback riding. There's one near Van Cortlandt Park. And also in City Island, there's a gorgeous horse equestrium. Also, you know, you need an active agent like myself or Dejanay to help you get a property in the Bronx so we can show you where all these great things are, because the Bronx is not the forgotten land like everyone thinks. And there's a lot of opportunity here. And, you know, we're always willing to help people and welcome them with open arms.
I'm excited. I live in a town where the average house is $2 million. My kids, when they get out of college, can't afford to move back here. They're probably going to get jobs in Manhattan, and they're going to have an opportunity to rent, where the average rent, I think, is $5,000 in Manhattan. But you guys were just telling me that they could consider buying a house beginning at $600,000 in the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
Or even a co-op to get started if they're going to school. You know, we have all the transportation. They could commute back to the city, but they can definitely get started with a nice little co-op and then work their way up to fit their budget.
Yep. And if they're going to be paying $5,000 in rent, they might as well just purchase, because that's what your mortgage is going to be.
Well, I'm excited. I think that's a very uplifting message to end the show. I want to thank my sincere gratitude to our fabulous guests. Thank you, Orion Jones, and thank you to The Real Deal, which is the gold standard and must read every morning for all realtors. I mean, I can't imagine a world without The Real Deal. So thank you for all of what you do, because I can't get enough of real estate reporting. And thank you, Sharene, and thank you, Dejanay, for your perspective on the Bronx from a true Bronx girl.
Thanks for having me.
This has been a very exciting show.
No problem. Thank you.
If you love real estate the way we love real estate, then go review Boroughs and Burbs. Write us a nice review. Tell all your friends and click like and let everybody know. And tell them to come watch episode 143 with Orion Jones, Sharene Long, and Dejanay, and they'll see what Boroughs Burbs is all about. And finally, thank you, Roberto, in the center of the known universe, Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Skipper, you're the one. You're in charge.
I love working with you. And by the way, I will give him a plug. RobertoCabrera.com is where I go to read Roberto's market report. Apparently he started talking about the hot as a pistol rental market in Manhattan, and people started calling him out on it. So if you want to know more about this, go to RobertoCabrera.com and read about how everybody accused Roberto of selling them out. Right?
True. Yes, true.
True. So go read his market report after you read The Real Deal. Thank you, Orion. Thank you, Sharene. Thank you, Dejanay.
Bye, guys.
Till next week. Bye-bye.